So let's talk a little bit about the input widgets that you have for Marimo, and let's also talk how you can organize them neatly. Because if you take just a little bit of extra effort, you end up with something that is just way more useful. So as a motivating example, I've got these three elements over here. It's a slider, it's a text element, and a text area. And they each have a label attached, and I'm showcasing that down below over here. I've got my slider, my text input, my large text input, these labels are attached, and I'm stacking them all vertically together. Now, as a next step, what I could do is I could say something like, okay, let's just grab the slider value, right? And as you would expect, if I change the slider value above, then you can also see that the value updates down below over here. So all of this is functional, but it could be the case that these elements are meant to be used together. Very typically with a form, it's not so much that you're interested in changing one value, you're interested in having the combination of all of these values, and you might be interested in grouping these together, so to say. Another thing that you might want to do is maybe just give a little bit of context. What is the user supposed to fill in? A sentence or two can really help. If you want to accomplish these things, then maybe just stacking those elements on top of each other isn't enough. But as luck would have it, the markdown utilities in Marimo can actually help you out a fair bit here. I've scrolled down a little bit, and you can see this new cell over here where I'm starting out by just declaring a little bit of markdown. Now, the markdown itself looks a bit like an F string when you initially look at it. There's a slider over here, a text over here, the text area over there. And sure, there's normal markdown text, I suppose, but this is actually very much like a format string. Note that I'm storing this markdown in a markdown variable over here, and down below, I'm constructing a form variable, and as the name would imply, I'm building a form. But the way that I'm going about that is I'm calling the batch method, and I'm just passing the slider variable, the text variable, and the text area variable that I had above. These were the input elements that I had in Marimo. Note that there needs to be a correspondence between the name of the keyword argument and the name that you see down below over here. You can go for different names, by the way, just make sure it's consistent. And when we do this, we now get a single form variable that contains all of these inputs, and this comes with a couple of interesting benefits. One thing is that I still have Markdown available to me, so if I wanted to, I could maybe add a little title. I added a header over here, which you can see down below. I've also added a block quote, which you can also see. And this is definitely a big plus because I can add context. I might be able to add images or specific instructions, so that's good. But there's also another side effect that's beneficial, and that is that this form variable over here, that is the grouped combination of all of those input widgets together with your markdown. And that also means that I can just call the value of that entire form, and then I have all of my inputs together. And that can be very convenient if you're dealing with a situation where you want those inputs to always be together. Again, I can change the input slider over here. You can see stuff move. I can write some text in here. I can also write some text down there. All that stuff just works. One small detail that should be said out loud, by the way. Even though I am passing a slider in here, if I were to update the slider in the form, that doesn't imply that the original slider gets an update too. Those are now independent once I've put them all in this batch. If I were to scroll back up now, you can see that the original slider is at 0, and I can change this slider as much as I like. The original slider is not going to change as a result. There's one final thing, though, that we can do to maybe enhance this experience just a little bit, and that is after the batch call, we can also call .form. And notice what happens when I now run this. We see that there's a border now, but there's also this new submit button that's been added. And that submit button actually does cause different behavior. Right now, you can see that form.value returns none. It doesn't return anything at this point in time. And that's because the form has never been submitted yet. Also notice that I can change the slider value, and there's no update happening down below over here. I can also write some text. When I hit submit now, though, that's when an update actually happens. And you can also see that the color has changed of the input element. You can also see that when I change the slider input, it becomes yellow again. And so far, again, because I've not hit the submit button, the number slider over here has also not updated. If I now hit submit again, then we do see the update. In summary, if you're interested in writing forms or input elements that are meant to be packed together, then consider using this pattern. Not only do you get the benefit of being able to add context to the form, but you also get a little bit of control on how cells update later down the line. There really are lots of moments where it's more convenient to think of your inputs as one batch instead of loose inputs in different cells. And for those moments, this pattern can really help keep your notebook nice and clean.